I, Brooke, am 32, and I royally messed up my marriage a year ago, now watching my husband, Nate, transform into a guy who acts like he could do so much better than me. It all started with my friend Melissa's bachelorette party in Miami, a girls' trip with beach vibes and way too many drinks. Nate wasn't thrilled about me going, but I told him he was being ridiculous, saying, "It's just a girls' weekend. I'm a grown woman. I don't need permission." The first night was fine, just dinner and drinks, but the second night everything went sideways. We hit a club downtown, and after a few cocktails and a few shots, things got blurry. I remember dancing with a guy who had dark hair and a jawline that reminded me of Nate, and in my drunk brain, I actually convinced myself he looked exactly like my husband. Ridiculous, right? The next thing I knew, I was waking up in a hotel room that wasn't mine with this stranger next to me, who, upon getting a good look at him in the daylight, looked nothing like Nate, except maybe the hair color, and I freaked out, grabbed my stuff, and bolted, completely devastated. Back at our hotel, Tiffany, one of the girls, spotted me doing the walk of shame, and I swore her to secrecy, promising her through tears that I'd made a horrible mistake. She promised not to say anything, and I thought that was that. Back home, I tried to act normal, smiling more, initiating sex, and basically overcompensating for my guilt. And for a few weeks, I actually thought I'd gotten away with it, constantly telling myself it was a one-time mistake that didn't have to ruin my marriage. Then came that awful day. Nate called me at work and asked me to meet him for lunch. Not a cute surprise date, as his voice was weird, controlled. When I got to the restaurant, one look at his face told me everything. His expression was perfectly blank, but his ears were bright red, his tell when he's furious. "I know what happened in Miami," he said, staring at me with cold eyes I'd never seen before, explaining, "Tiffany's husband is friends with my colleague." Word got back to me. I completely lost it right there in the restaurant, sobbing, blabbering about how drunk I was, how the guy looked just like him, how it was a stupid, horrible mistake, throwing everything at the wall, hoping something would stick. But the "he looked like you" excuse sounded pathetic even to my own ears. Nate just watched me melt down with a detached look, and when I finally ran out of excuses, he simply stood up, put money on the table, and said, "I need some time. Don't call me." He didn't come home for a whole week of me calling, texting, leaving tearful voicemails. I was terrified he was off finding the guy from the club, or, worse, talking to divorce lawyers, and I barely ate or slept. When he finally came back, he looked different somehow, calmer, but colder, and he sat me down and said, "Here's how this is going to work if you want to save this marriage. No more drinking. Period. No more girls' trips. Complete transparency with your phone and social media. One slip up and I'm gone." I agreed immediately. I would have agreed to anything, just so relieved he was giving me another chance. I haven't touched alcohol since that day and became the perfect wife, cooking, cleaning, whatever he wanted, thinking eventually things would go back to normal. That was a year ago, and things never went back to normal. I started noticing the changes about a month after our reconciliation. Nate, already attractive, tall, naturally fit with confidence, suddenly kicked everything into overdrive, doubling his gym time from 3 days a week to 6, starting to meal prep high protein lunches, downloading meditation apps, and buying a whole new wardrobe that fit his increasingly muscular frame perfectly. At 39, he started looking better than guys in their 20s. At first, I thought it was hot, maybe his way of rebuilding confidence, and I even tried joining him at the gym a few times. But he made it clear this was his thing. And he seemed annoyed by my presence, like I was intruding on his space, just saying thanks, with barely a smile when I tried to be flirty about his new muscles. His entire focus shifted. He started staying later at the office, saying he was working toward a promotion. Weekend brunches with me were replaced with networking events, and our date nights dwindled to maybe once a month, where he seemed distracted, always saying he was just working toward our future. But it felt more like he was working toward his future, and I was no longer a priority. Then came the social events for work. Suddenly, there were all these happy hours and client dinners that I wasn't invited to. "It's just work stuff. You'd be bored," he'd say, coming home late, smelling like expensive cologne and sometimes with a hint of perfume that wasn't mine. When I questioned him, he'd roll his eyes, saying, "I'm networking, Brooke. That's how you get ahead." Like I was an idiot. One night, I found a long blonde hair on his jacket and confronted him, but he didn't even flinch, casually explaining, "Probably from Stephanie in accounting. We were stuck in the same elevator." His dismissive explanation made me feel crazy for even asking. The most infuriating part, our sex life completely changed. Before, Nate was always initiating and telling me how beautiful I was, but now he rarely made the first move. And when we did have sex, it felt mechanical. "Is something wrong?" I asked him once, and he simply said, "Nothing's wrong, just tired from the gym," rolling away. I tried everything to get his attention back: new lingerie, surprise lunch visits, texting, but his responses grew increasingly lukewarm. It was like watching someone slowly check out of our relationship while still physically being there. Something was changing in my husband, and it terrified me. He wasn't leaving, not technically, but emotionally he was already halfway out the door, and the worst part was I couldn't really blame him, but I also couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to these changes than just recovering from my betrayal. Everything came to a head 3 months ago at a fancy work party Nate actually invited me to. I spent hours getting ready, thinking maybe this was his way of bringing me back into his life. But the moment we walked into that rooftop event, I realized why he brought me. He wanted me to see exactly what I was up against. The room was filled with gorgeous women, the kind with perfect everything, and they all knew my husband. Nate, "Oh my God, you look amazing." A tall redhead, Vanessa, practically launched herself at him. "That new workout routine is definitely working." Nate replied, giving her the smile I hadn't seen directed at me in months. "Thanks, Vanessa. The trainer you recommended is brutal, but worth it." Throughout the night, it was the same story with different women, lighting up like Christmas trees when they spotted Nate, while I stood there with my Target dress, which suddenly felt cheap, feeling like complete garbage. "Who are all these women?" I whispered to Nate between his adoring fan encounters. "Just colleagues," he said casually, explaining. "That's Vanessa. She's a model our firm represents. Same with Alexis over there in Madison. The tall, blonde, probably 25-year-old wearing a dress that cost more than our monthly mortgage payment. You represent a lot of models, huh?" I couldn't keep the edge out of my voice. As the night wore on, I watched these women flirt shamelessly with my husband, and while Nate wasn't exactly flirting back, he wasn't shutting it down either. A wink here, a knowing smile there, eating up the attention while I stood by like a pathetic accessory. When one particularly gorgeous brunette handed Nate her business card for coffee sometime, I'd had enough and grabbed his arm. "What is happening right now? Are you seriously going to get coffee with her?" Nate slipped the card into his pocket with a casual shrug. "It's networking, Brooke. That's how business works." "That wasn't business. She was practically undressing you with her eyes." He gave me a look, part amusement, part pity, that made me feel 2 inches tall. "Don't worry about it. It's not a bachelorette party in Miami." The comment hit me like a slap. He had never thrown my mistake in my face so blatantly before. I stood there speechless as he walked off to chat with some senior partner, leaving me alone. On the Uber ride home, I tried to talk to him about it. "Those women were all over you, and you did nothing to stop it." He simply said, "They were being friendly. You're overreacting. Maybe you're projecting. Not everyone crosses lines when they're being social." Another dig at my infidelity, and I shut up. That night, watching him get ready for bed with his new confidence and defined body, a terrifying thought hit me. My husband was turning into someone who was out of my league, and he knew it. After that party, my paranoia went into overdrive. I started checking his phone, scrolling through his texts, emails, and call history, looking for evidence of something, anything. But most days, I'd find nothing suspicious. Just work emails, texts with his gym buddy, normal stuff, and the lack of evidence almost made it worse. I began tracking his location through his phone, watching the little dot move from our house to his office, sometimes to the gym, occasionally to restaurants or bars I didn't recognize. During these unknown stops, I'd text him casually, "How's your day going?" just to see how long it would take him to respond, and what excuse he'd give in a meeting or grabbing coffee with the team were his usual responses. Nothing I could prove was a lie, but nothing that reassured me either. The Nate I married would have shown me pictures of his colleagues or invited me to join them. But this new Nate kept his worlds completely separate. I was no longer welcome in his professional life, and he seemed perfectly content with that arrangement. I started dropping by his office unexpectedly, bringing lunch, but the receptionist always had this pitying look, and Nate would emerge looking annoyed, accepting my lunch with a tight smile before ushering me back to the elevator, telling me, "You can't just show up here, Brooke. I have meetings, clients. It's unprofessional." Before my mistake, he'd always been thrilled to see me. Now I was an inconvenience. One afternoon, I drove by the gym and spotted his car, feeling a momentary relief until I went inside and couldn't find him. The front desk said he'd checked in, but might be in one of the private training rooms. Private training rooms? Since when did Nate need private training? I waited in the parking lot for 40 minutes until he emerged with a fit woman in workout clothes, laughing about something as they walked to their cars. No touching, but the familiar way they talked made my stomach turn. When Nate got home that evening, I casually asked, "Did you go alone today?" "Yeah, just the usual routine," he said, not looking up from his phone, and the lie hung in the air, but I swallowed my suspicion and said nothing. It wasn't just his potential cheating that was eating at me. It was the way other women looked at him now. At the grocery store, at restaurants, even at church. Female eyes following his tall frame, his chiseled jawline, the confident way he carried himself. The way he looked at me had changed too. There was a clinical quality to his gaze now, like he was constantly evaluating whether I was still worth his time. The man who once couldn't keep his hands off me now seemed to touch me only out of obligation, and his compliments felt hollow. One night, after he declined my advances for the third time that week, I broke down. "Are you punishing me? Is that what this is about?" "What are you talking about?" he asked, genuinely confused. "You're distant. You're cold. You barely touch me anymore. If you haven't forgiven me, just say so." Nate sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I'm not punishing you, Brooke. I'm just focused on myself right now, on my career, on my health. Is that so wrong?" "It is when it feels like you're preparing for a life without me." He didn't deny it. He just looked at me with those unreadable eyes and said, "I'm preparing for a better life. Whether you're in it or not is up to you." I'd never felt more terrified in my entire marriage. A few weeks after my parking lot stakeout, I decided enough was enough and waited until he was home on a Saturday, reading on his tablet, glasses perched on his nose, another new addition that somehow made him even more attractive. "We need to talk," I said, using the same serious tone he'd used when confronting me about Miami. "About whatever's going on with you. The late nights, the private training sessions you lie about, the women from your office who call you after hours. Are you having an affair? Because if you are, I deserve to know." Nate removed his glasses slowly. "I'm not having an affair, Brooke." "Then why are you acting so different? Why do you barely look at me anymore? Why do you lie about who you're with?" He sighed, then retrieved his phone, pulling up his calendar, which clearly showed his training sessions with Alexis, the woman I'd seen him with, who was a certified executive fitness trainer subsidized by his firm. Late meetings, client dinners, everything. Alex is Alexis. She's a certified trainer. My firm subsidizes it. Those late calls, client calls from the West Coast, the networking events. Exactly what I said they were. I stared at the evidence. "But you lied. You said you worked out alone." "Because you've been acting like a private investigator for months, checking my phone, following me to the gym, showing up at my office unannounced. It's exhausting, Brooke. So sometimes, yes, I give simple answers to avoid the interrogation." He looked tired. "Do you realize how draining it is? I'm trying to advance my career, improve myself, move forward from what happened, and meanwhile, you're treating me like I'm the one who cheated." His words hit me hard. "Then why pull away from me? Why all the changes?" Nate was quiet. "When I found out what happened in Miami, something broke in me. Not just trust, something deeper. The way I saw myself, the way I saw us. I realized I'd been complacent, taking our relationship for granted." Gesturing to himself, All of this, the fitness, the career focus, the networking, it's not about replacing you. It's about rebuilding myself, finding my worth outside of just being Brooke's husband. But you're acting like you don't even want me anymore, I said, tears welling up. I'm trying to want you in a healthy way, he replied gently but firm. Before, my whole world revolved around you. That's not sustainable, especially after what happened. I need to value myself enough that if something like Miami ever happened again, I'd have the strength to walk away. His honesty stung worse than any accusation. He wasn't cheating. He was preparing himself emotionally to leave me if necessary. So what happens now, I asked. That depends, he said. Can you accept that I'm not the same person I was before? That our relationship can't go back to how it was? What does that even mean? It means I need space to grow. It means I'm not going to prioritize your feelings over my well-being anymore. It means you need to deal with your insecurity without making it my problem. I felt slapped. So I just have to accept you flirting with models and coming home late and treating me like an afterthought. I don't flirt with them. I network. There's a difference. And this right here is exactly the problem. You can't see past your jealousy to understand what I'm trying to build for us. For us or for you? I challenged. At this point, I'm not sure there's a difference, he said quietly. We stared at each other across an immeasurable distance. He wasn't the man I married anymore, and he didn't seem interested in going back to being that man. I love you, Brooke. I do, but I don't need you the way I used to, and that's probably healthier for both of us. I'd wanted clarity, and I got it, but it wasn't the answer I was hoping for. Everything fell apart last week. A full year after Miami, and the final nail in the coffin of our marriage appeared out of nowhere. Nate came home with a bottle of champagne, and for a fleeting moment, I thought it was a gesture of reconciliation. He popped it open, poured 2 glasses, and handed one to me with a smile I hadn't seen in months. I made partner, he said simply. I forced a smile. That's amazing. Congratulations. We clinked glasses, and I waited for him to say something about us, but instead, he said something that shattered what was left of my world. I've been in therapy for the past 10 months. Therapy? Why didn't you tell me? Because I needed to figure some things out on my own. I've been working through what happened in Miami, my feelings about our marriage, what I want for my future. And what conclusions have you come to? I asked, dreading the answer. I want a divorce, Brooke. The words hung in the air with calm certainty. But I thought you were trying to forgive me, I stammered. I have forgiven you. This isn't about punishment. It's about recognition. We're not good for each other anymore. Is there someone else? No. This is about me finally putting myself first. He explained he'd already found an apartment and would be moving out the following weekend. Everything was arranged. Lawyers, finances, even who would get which furniture. He'd been planning this for months while I was busy checking his phone. What about everything we've built together? 3 years of marriage just gone. Nate gave me a sad smile. What exactly have we built, Brooke? A relationship where you cheated within the first year, where I've spent the last 12 months trying to rebuild my self-worth, where you've been more focused on catching me doing something wrong than on fixing what you broke. I had no answer for that. The next few days were a blur. Nate packed methodically, taking only what he needed, with no arguments or dramatic scenes. On his last day, I made one final desperate attempt. Please don't do this. We can go to therapy together. I can change. He paused. You know what? My therapist helped me realize that I deserve someone who wouldn't have cheated in the first place. Someone who values faithfulness the same way I do. It was one mistake, I cried. A mistake is forgetting to pay a bill or burning dinner. You made a series of choices, Brooke. You chose to drink too much. You chose to dance with that guy. You chose to go to his hotel. And after, you chose to lie about it until you were caught. He wasn't angry, just clear, like he was finally seeing our relationship for what it really was. I wish you the best. I really do. But we're done. I watched through our front window as he loaded the last of his things into his car. He looked lighter, unburdened. The man who drove away wasn't the same one I'd married 3 years ago. He was stronger, more confident, completely self-possessed. That night, scrolling through social media, I saw a post from Vanessa, the redhead, a group photo at a rooftop bar, and there was Nate in the background, smiling, surrounded by colleagues celebrating his promotion, looking happy, genuinely, effortlessly happy without me. 2 days later, my friend sent me a listing for a condo. Isn't this the building Nate wanted to buy in last year? The one you said was too expensive. Sure enough, Nate's name was on the purchase record. He bought a place in the luxury building he'd shown me months ago. He'd been planning this move, this new life, right under my nose. The irony isn't lost on me. A year ago, I thought I could have a wild night in Miami with no consequences, thinking my husband would always be there, always adoring me, always putting me first. Now he's gone, living his best life in a fancy condo, making partner, looking better than ever, and I'm still here, alone with the consequences of my actions. Sometimes I wonder if he orchestrated this whole thing, the glow up, the career advancement, just to show me exactly what I threw away that night in Miami. But I know that gives me too much credit in his story. The truth is, I'm not the main character in his life anymore. He's moved on to a new chapter where he's the hero of his own story, not just a supporting character in mine, and I'm still stuck in the aftermath of my mistake, finally understanding what it means to watch someone become completely out of your league. If this confession kept you hooked, make sure to subscribe, like, and share. We share powerful true stories every day that explore the complex realities of life.